I got my bench cleaned up, and I got all those parts, the packages that I got in the mail, my wife brought home, put away. This is the reason I got the bench cleaned up. These are my wife's power saws. This is a Stihl MSA 120C, a battery operated saw. There's the battery for it. I don't know how many amp hours or anything that is, but AK20, 36 volt, 2.8 amp hours. Anyway, got this for my wife Christmas before last. See, I got it at the local saw shop here. They had it on sale. Normally these things are pretty expensive. It was still pretty expensive, but normally you buy the saw for $300 and some, and then you got to buy the battery for $300 and some, and you got to buy the battery charger for $300 and some. This came as a package for $350 or something like that for the whole thing. And about 4 years ago or so, I got her this saw for Christmas. This is actually a replacement for another one that I got that I dropped in the salt water when I was working on a hangar, down on the floating hangar down in the water. This is an MS 180C. And I got that for her for Christmas a few years ago. And she liked these little saw a lot better than my bigger saws because she could handle them a lot better. And she was excited to get this saw, and she was really excited to get this saw, and she uses it quite a bit. She used this one quite a bit. She uses this one quite a bit. Now, how many guys' wives would be excited to get a chainsaw for a Christmas present? But she was ecstatic. She just thought they were great. So I didn't get her a chainsaw for Christmas this last Christmas. I got her a new easy chair, a recliner. So anyway, I just put the little electric saw, battery operated saw, up here on the bench. It hadn't been cleaned out. She neglected it and it was pretty dirty, so I just wiped it down. I took the bar cover off of it here, the clamp off of it, cleaned out all the sawdust and crap inside of it, tightened the chain and sharpened the chain for her. I'll have to take the battery out, put it on the battery charger, and I think it needs a little bit of oil, bar oil. It would be easy to forget the bar oil on these because you just change the battery, and normally on the saw when you gas it up, you put gas in it and oil in it at the same time. And this one you don't need to gas up, you just check the battery. But it would be pretty easy to forget the chain oil on these, the bar oil. Anyway, that one's all cleaned up and ready to go. Now this little saw she used quite a bit. We use it around the place here quite a bit, and we take it out when we go out to cut firewood and stuff like that, so she can help. It works pretty good for lemon and small wood for firewood and stuff like that. But it hasn't run for a couple of years. My son was running it. He's kind of tough on things. He could break an anvil with a feather duster. Well, anyway, it's pretty dirty. It hasn't been cleaned up. Now, some of this stuff on here is my fault because it was sitting underneath the bench, the workbench out there in the hangar where I store the saws. And I put something else on there on the bench and the workbench I was working on that was kind of dirty, and I cleaned it off out there and sprayed it off with the solvent in the air, and stuff splashed all over everything. So I've got a couple of saws there that were underneath the bench that need to be cleaned up and get that crap wiped off of them, but I'll get that wiped down. One of the things I did for my old man when I would be out in the woods with him, even when I was a kid, I started about 8 years old, was helping cleaning the saw up. At the end of the workday every day, we'd take the bar and chain off, and clean out the bar, take the clutch off of it, because there's a bearing inside the clutch. It was a bushing on the early saws, a bronze bushing, and a little needle bearing on the later ones, and we'd oil those, clean all the sawdust and crap build up on the saw. You got to clean off all the cylinders and everything so that they get air flowing over them to cool the saws. So we do that, like I said, every night. Pull the air filters off of them and clean the air filters and the carburetor box, and get all that stuff all cleaned up for the next day. Well, this saw, like I said, I don't use it. My wife was using it, my son used it a little bit, and of course they don't clean up anything when they're done with it. They just use it and put it away. But my son was using it and it quit. He looked at it and tried to get it running, and he couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. And so it's sat in here for a couple of years now without running. My wife has mostly been using that battery operated saw for around here, but there's some things we need a little more power and a little longer power with. I got to go out and cut some timber down and stuff. I've got some logs or some trees selected out on the Forest Service land. We got to go cut down and bring in and get milled up for the warehouse that I'm going to build, the shed that I'm going to build. And there's some firewood that needs to be cut, and there's always some stuff that's just too big for the battery saw to cut. And this is ideal for her to use for some of the smaller stuff that's not too big. And so I want to get it running so we can use it for limbing and stuff like that. So the first thing I do is just wipe it down. That's always what the first thing I do is clean it up so we don't get crud in the fuel tank, in the carburetor, stuff like that. So you can see guys weren't very good about cleaning it up when they got done with it. Well, anyway, I got to figure out what's wrong with it. And one of the first things to do is to check the spark plug, check the ignition. Actually, you pull the spark plug out and check it, and that tells you whether the ignition is working or not. The spark plugs should be changed pretty regular on these. They take a heck of a beating. These things run at 12,000 RPM or so, and they get really hot. And one of the things that happens sometimes on these is this shutoff will short out and wire. I'm looking at that there, and that thing is working like it's supposed to. So that's what I'm going to do. Pull the spark plug out on that and pull it through a few times and see if the spark plug is working, see if it's got spark. So we've only got 3 things on these gasoline engine to check, and it's fuel, air, and fire. So we'll check the fire first, and then we'll go through and check the fuel and the air. The fuel in the air, of course, is the carburetor and the fuel tank. We'll see if the fuel tank fuel filter is plugged up and dirty, or if the fuel lines are broke, or if the carburetor needs to be rebuilt. I have taken this saw, taken the spark plug out of it. I'll go ahead and check it here. I got spark if I pull it through fast, but if I pull it through slow, it doesn't have any spark. Now, this is one of the first things I learned to do on working on chainsaw, power saw, or any small equipment. I think I was about 7 years old or so when I asked my dad to help him, and he would have me hold on to the spark plug while he pulled it through. And if my eyes lit up, he knew it had spark, that the coil was good and the plug was good. It only took me about 3 or 4 times to figure out that there was a better way to do that than that. I don't think my little brother ever figured it out, because he still does it like that. Of course, he might get a charge out of it, I don't know. So I got a new spark plug. Anyway, I buy those by the box, because I change them pretty regularly in my Husqvarnas. And this has spark too, but it doesn't have any spark when I pull it through slow. So that tells me that it's probably the coil bad on there. So I'm going to replace the coil. Now it might be the flywheel bad on it too, I don't know. It could be the magnets demagnetizing the flywheel. Well, anyway, I got to take this cover off, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts in there to hold that on. One of them is here on the park and brake, and 2 back here and 1 up forward. And then I got to take these gas caps off too, fuel and oil cap off of there too. So got to go find a wrench to do that. Well, it's February 6th. I looked at this last night and decided the coil, either the coil was weak. It was getting a weak spark anyway, even with a new plug in it. It was still getting a weak spark. I was getting a spark. I cleaned out the fuel filter, put it back in there, and cranked it a bunch of times. I got it to kind of half-assed fire once, and that was about it. So anyway, I'm pretty sure that the ignition system is bad on here. So I spent the morning today going looking for parts, and I found a kit that comes complete with a new coil, ignition wire, the whole works, as well as the carburetor and all the parts for the carburetor, fuel lines and everything. I ordered that, and then I found a new flywheel, and so I ordered that. Now ordinarily you wouldn't think about the flywheel, ordinarily it's ignition system, but ordinarily you wind up with no spark at all out of it. This is basically a magneto system, and this flywheel has magnets in it. As they revolve around and go by the coil there, they create an electric current, which gets built up and stored in the coil and then fires through the spark plug and whatnot. Used to take 4 pieces. You had the flywheel with the magnets in it, and then you had a coil, and then there was points and condenser. And any one of those parts of it, generally it was usually the coil or the points. Sometimes the condenser would go bad, but not very often. What you'd usually replace the points and condenser is a unit, just like on a car, and then the coil, check it. They didn't go bad quite so often, but sometimes it'd just be a bad coil. But every once in a while the magnets get weak in those flywheels. If they're weak, then they're not going to generate a strong electronic current. So that's why I went ahead and ordered the flywheel and the coil and carburetor kit. Now I'm pretty sure it's not the carburetor because it's just got a weak spark. This saw is old enough that the diaphragms in the carburetor could be getting stiff and not working as efficiently as they do when they're new, so I've gone ahead and got a new carburetor kit for it. Well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing away for now. And I'm going to work on my 372. I put a new carburetor on it here a few months ago, so it's working fine, but we've got some logging to do with it. And this chain, actually the chain is it's about 2/3 gone, but it's still usable, so I guess I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm just going to sharpen the chain up and clean the saw up, and it should be good to go, ready to go. I was thinking about putting a new chain on there, but I think I'll wait on that. But right now I got to go plow some snow. About 2 inches of powdery snow fell last night, overnight. It's not enough to impede driving in it or anything, except for the fact it's like talcum powder on the driveway. As the driveway still froze up hard, there's still ice on it and stuff, and this snow is packing on it a little bit and making it slippery, and like I said, it's like talcum powder on top of it. So I'm going to go plow it. And we got kind of a good news, bad news thing. Forecast is for us to go through a dry spell for a while here, so the rain and moisture is going to quit for a while, and the air is going to clear up. The problem with that is it's going to get cold, even colder than what we've had so far this winter. Looks like down to 0 on a few nights. So I'm going to get the driveway scraped up, and then I'm going to go ahead and probably bank some snow around the base of the cabin to try to keep some heat in there, try to keep some of the cold from penetrating underneath the cabin. So